All right, so welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into a little bit more about sound waves, how they work, and more importantly, how their speed is affected by the type of medium that they're traveling through. So up until now, we've been talking about sound in terms of like just traveling through the air, because that's normally how we experience it. But sound can travel through a lot of different stuff. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today, because the next video is going to be talking about the same thing with electromagnetic waves, and we'll be comparing and contrasting those along the way. So first thing we want to do, though, is learn a little bit more about what sound looks like. Now, we know that sound travels which way? Yeah, longitudinally, right? Not transversely. You're practicing those, right? Good. Just making sure. So here's a little bit about what sound looks like and how we can actually view sound. It's actually pretty cool. Check this out.
I'm going to show you the sound of a clap. And I don't mean some digital depiction of a clap. I mean that when this man's hands come together, you're going to see something that is normally invisible.
Now, I want to pause for a second and go back a little bit. Because normally when we think of sound waves, sometimes we see these waveforms that look like this, but that doesn't look like longitudinal wave motion. That looks like transverse wave motion. So what's going on there? Well, we'll get to that in a minute too. So let's jump back into this.
Digital depiction of a clap. I mean that when this man's hands come together, you're going to see something that is fully invisible. You're going to see the actual sound wave leaving his hands and traveling outward at 761 miles per hour, the speed of sound. And here it is again.
Watch it again.
How is this possible?
Ripples.
Well, I'll start the explanation not with sound, but with the heat from a lighter. There's a puff of butane, sparks fly, and the fuel ignites. But that shape billowing up from the flame isn't smoke. That's normal air that has been expanded by heat. We're able to see the density change thanks to a technique called Schlieren flow visualization.
Now, Schlieren flow visualization. Now, the density change due to heat here. So that's a heat method. That's a heat transfer method caused by changes in density. Which one is that again? Yeah, convection. Now, this is actually something we can see without this Schlieren flow visualization. If your parents have ever been barbecuing outside with the grill, and they open it up, and then you look at the air, it almost looks like it's kind of like shimmering or shaking, or like almost like it looks weird. What you're seeing there is the light reflecting differently back into your eyes off of that different density air. It's actually a pretty cool effect that we'll talk more about a little bit later, but Schlieren flow.
Flow visualization. Here's how it works. You start off with a light shining through a single slit. If you reflect that light off a parabolic mirror, all the rays become parallel, and then you can use another parabolic mirror to refocus the light down to a single focal point, and then in through the lens of a camera to make a picture. Now here's the trick. You place some sort of barrier right at the focal point. Now you add something that will distort the air, like a candle. The candle will block light rays, making a silhouette, and the flame will make light. But rising heat will change the density of the air above the lighter, and that will bend the light rays. The bent light ray won't pass through the focal point. It will be blocked by the barrier, and the picture will be darker. This technique can be used to see anything that distorts the air. The heat from a hair straightener, for example.
Mm-hmm. Or
Even the heat coming off a human hand.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Epidemiologists use it to study sneezes and coughs.
And that's why, let's go back for a second there, because I'm going to get up on my pedestal for a second here. We will
Human
play
hand.
that, and we will pause it again.
Epidemiologists use it to study.
So see that right there? Now that's not a mask. That's just a hand covering. Now people are, like, oh, well, I don't have any N95 masks, so why should I even wear a mask? Any kind of covering is going to protect from this monstrosity going on over here.
Epidemiologists use it to study sneezes and coughs.
So yeah, look at that.
Engineers use it
Yeah. So, any kind of face covering helps. Just saying.
to study aerodynamic flow. And sound, well, that's just another change in air density.
And what I want you to notice here, too, very important, is that sound waves don't just travel in those little bands, those little, like, thick, little, that we've been looking at, like little sections of air particles. When you make a sound, it goes out uniformly. Now, some of that sound, depending on how it's being directed, like when I go like this, towards the microphone, you can kind of hear a lot more of the sound more clearly, because a lot of those sound waves are being kind of reflected and kind of focused that way. And when I go like this, the sound, you don't hear it as well, or you hear it differently. That's because the sound waves that would be going straight towards the microphone that way are now being obstructed a little bit, and you have to rely on the sound waves bouncing off of other things in order to hear that. So you can hear very clearly when I go like this, you get a very different sound than when I go like this. And it's still possible to hear me even though I'm going like this, because those sound waves are going out in all sorts of different directions, which is why you can still hear someone even if they're not talking directly at you.
A traveling compression wave. So Schlieren visualization, along with a high-speed camera, can be used to see it as well. Here's a book landing on a table. See it as well.
So, a lot of times you're going to be seeing waves drawn as these concentric circles like this, kind of showing the compressions and the rarefactions. So the kind of dense areas are the compressed parts, and the thin parts are the rarefaction parts. So we'll be looking at a lot of sound waves like this, and we'll be drawing them as concentric circles. And this is why, because that's what it actually looks like.
Here's a book landing, and sound, well, that's just another change in air density, a traveling compression wave. So Schlieren visualization, along with a high-speed camera, can be used to see it as well.
That's pretty cool.
Here's a book landing on a table. The end of a towel being snapped. A firecracker. An AK-47. And of course, a clap.
So, are they talking? Yeah. See, even just talking. Look at all the... Just a little bit of this. Even this. Even this. Even this. It's not ideal, but, you know, does a lot. Just saying. Let's see. Elbow. So, important thing to get out of that is that sound travels uniformly out like that with these compressions of rarefactions. They're not just straight little bands of energy. They go out, they propagate uniformly in all directions. Important. And we say uniformly, meaning like you don't hear a different sound if I'm going like this versus if I'm going like this. If we're both stationary, it's important for another video. If I go like this and I go like this, you hear the same quality of sound. I mean, it's not as loud, but you don't hear a different sound. It's not like you hear this way, and then you hear this way, or you hear this way. Like this, you don't hear a different sound. You hear the same sound. It just might be a little bit quieter. And now we're going to get into how does sound actually travel. So we're going to try to visualize this a little bit better. It might be, a little redundant, but this is going to kind of preview the next things we're going to be looking at. So just a kind of a recap. It would help if the video played, wouldn't it?
The first is that sound waves are a bouncing of atoms or particles into one another.
Right, so the particles themselves don't move. When I make a sound, like I'm not shooting air into your ear. I mean, even though you kind of saw it from the cough, yeah, you can move particles that way. But when you're just straight up talking, the particles are just being bumped into each other. The energy travels down the line kind of like dominoes, but the dominoes don't slide from my mouth into your ear. They just kind of knock into the next one as they go down the line.
Second, waves can travel very far. However, the atoms themselves only travel a short distance.
See? They're not going very far when you make sounds. They kind of stay
Third,
together.
waves travel at the speed of sound, and these speeds are material dependent.
Yeah, sound's going to travel differently in different materials. You can kind of see these numbers here, but we'll talk about why those numbers are the way they are in a minute.
Fourth, sequential waves in the same medium travel at the same speed, and thus one wave does not catch up with the following wave. And finally, fifth, the coup de grace of concepts. A sound wave isn't really an object like a steel bar, a wooden table, or atoms of air, but rather, a sound wave is a propagation of force or motion.
Or energy. Because when I say waves, you say waves. Waves. Did you do it? Be honest, did you do it? I hope so. Okay. So let's keep getting back into this.
When we hear something, we are in essence hearing the motion that an object makes, or how kind of that object is applying a force to the air particles around it, thereby causing those air particles to bounce around, and that bouncing is picked up by your ears and perceived as sound.
So, Waves are energy, not matter. And with sound especially, it's this kind of domino effect passing from one molecule to another. It's very important for this next video we're going to watch. But to talk about why do we often see waves drawn as transverse motion instead of longitudinal motion, just because it's easier. It's easier to visualize, the ups and downs, the amplitude for the volume. It's hard to see amplitude here in terms of much more squished or much less squished. So basically they just convert it. So they draw it out, but everywhere where you've got a compression, you draw a crest. And everywhere where you've got the most rarefaction, the most stretched out part, you draw a trough. And then you kind of connect the dots. That's it. So it's just kind of converted that way. So we can visualize it transversely, even though it's kind of traveling longitudinally.
Transmission of sound. Every sound is produced by a vibration. Vibration is the back and forth movement of an object. As you speak, vibrations are produced by the vocal cords in the throat. You can hear only when the sound energy reaches your ears. But how does sound energy travel?
Now, I think this video's got its own background music, so we're just going to pause this for a second. We'll go back into this.
Form of sound. Zook.
So this is going to give us a brief review about
Sound
transverse
energy
versus
travels
longitudinal
in the
motion.
form of sound waves. There are mainly two types of waves.
Motion.
Transverse wave
Motion.
and longitudinal wave.
Motion.
Let us see how waves travel. We
This is a
can
really good
use a
visualization.
slinky spring to observe both types of waves. Emily is holding one side of the slinky, while Dr. Zook is holding the other end. With a quick upward flick of the wrist, Dr. Zook has sent energy traveling through the slinky. Notice how the slinky moves? This is a transverse wave.
Motion.
In a transverse wave, the particles vibrate at a right angle to the direction of the wave. The wave traveled from Dr. Zook to Emily and back. Now let's see what a longitudinal wave looks like.
Motion.
Emily is holding one end of the slinky, while Dr. Zook is pulling its other end towards himself.
We would have done this in class with a huge, long, giant slinky. It's so much fun. I'm pretty good at it.
And then pushing it towards Emily. Watch closely, and you will notice that some of the coils crowd close together and then slowly move farther apart.
Rarefactions.
This is because the vibrations are parallel to the direction of the wave. If the wave moves from right to left, then the particles also vibrate from right to left. This is a longitudinal wave.
Motion. And you'll notice that these particles are kind of staying where they are, right? They're moving back and forth, but they're not traveling down the line. They're not translating. They're just oscillating. Translating meaning moving.
Sound waves are longitudinal waves.
Motion.
These waves travel at different speeds in different mediums. The medium could be a solid, liquid, or gas. Now let's see how this works.
So, sound waves can travel in all three big states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. Now, liquid, a lot of people have experienced this before. Like if you've been in a pool or a lake or something like that, and you go underwater and you try to talk to your friends, it's like because obviously you can't articulate as well. But you can definitely still hear them. You can definitely still hear sounds, and sometimes you might notice that it's louder. Like it sounds like it's a lot closer to you. Well, it's because the energy is actually traveling faster towards you. And in a solid, they even travel even faster. The video's going to get into this in a minute. But there's this phrase that you hear a lot used in society today. Sometimes, well, some people, maybe older people, they like when they're talking about like some plans or some gossip, they'll be like, "All right, hey, keep your ear to the ground for me. Keep your ear to the ground." Well, that actually comes back from like cowboys times, like Old West, because what people would do is they would actually put their ear to the ground to listen to see if somebody was coming, because you can actually hear the sound waves through the earth faster than you can hear them through the air. So you would actually kind of hear a muffled kind of, and you could tell that was like horses. I mean, that was a horrible horse. I mean, the horse is more like, but I guess like the whole group of them would be like. You actually see this in the second Lord of the Rings movie, for those of you who are fans. At the very beginning, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are tracking down a group of orcs who've stolen their little hobbit friends. And they're days behind them. They're really trying to track. They're very far away. But the movie opens with Aragorn like with his ear to a rock, and he's just sitting there listening. And he goes, "Their pace has quickened. They must have picked up our scent." And they start to run. And it's like, no, he's not like using mysticism and communing with like the earth or anything like that. There's no magic there. He's just using science because he's listening to the earth. He's listening to that rock, and you can kind of hear the faint kind of. So it kind of went from a to a. And he could tell that they were now moving faster because you can hear the sound faster through the solid than you could through the air. Maybe not as clearly. You might not be able to make out what the sound is as clearly because some of those frequencies that would define the sound are getting absorbed. But you can definitely hear the sound faster. And this is going to explain why.
In a solid, the particles are very close together. Sound energy moves as one particle hits the other particle. With the particles being so close together, sound travels quickest through a solid.
Right? Because sound is this kind of passing of energy from molecule to molecule. And the closer the molecules are, the faster that energy can get down the line.
If we look at particles in a liquid, they appear to be slightly further apart when compared to solid. Thus, sound energy takes a little longer to travel through a liquid. Look at the particles of gas. They are spread out, and hence, sound waves travel most slowly through them. Now we know how sound travels in different media. The vibration of particles produces waves. Wavelength is the distance between two consecutive compressions or rarefactions.
So that's the big idea there, is that sound travels differently in different types of media. And especially when we're talking about media like this, like the biggest determining factor is the density. The denser the object is, the faster the sound can get through it. Maybe not as clearly, and you might not be able to hear the exact same sound, but it definitely travels fastest through the more dense materials. Kind of make sense? Hopefully. So actually, we're going to pause. We're going to come back to this in a second. So we're going to talk about this chart now. So we're going to go back to it. This is like back from the first video. So we had this, and this is going to help us kind of organize the speeds of waves in different media. So mechanical waves, so we're going to list them for the media from fastest to slowest. Right? So now we have a good idea of how sound travels. Right? So it goes fastest through a solid, slowest through a gas. Because here it depends on how close the molecules are. Because mechanical waves are the medium. They transfer energy by oscillating the medium. The closer the molecules are, the faster that energy can get transferred down the line. So mechanical waves, not just sound, but all mechanical waves travel fastest through a solid, then a liquid, then a gas, if they can travel through different media. But density is the biggest factor here. So now that we've got that, we're going to see a little bit of a summary of sound from our good friend who's going to come back a little bit later in the next video when we talk about light, or actually when we talk about the Doppler effect. Charlie. He's a pretty cool guy. He does all that cool stuff. Check this out. No. Okay, cool. Gotta hit the play button. Thought I animated it in.
Is an example of a sound. But as mundane as that sound might sound on its own, the process that it takes for that sound to get from myself to yourself is more complicated than you might think. Fortunately, however, it's not complicated enough to stop me from trying to explain to you the whole process through the medium of song in this week's episode of...
So, we're going to watch this through all the way once, and then we'll go back and we'll break it down to different things. But I wanted to pause there for a second because his nice little, medium pun, waves, medium. Do you get it? Okay.
Explain to you the whole process through the medium of song in this week's episode of Fun Science, Fun Science, Fun Science, it's a science of fun, yeah. Ready? It starts with an idea or an impulse to make a sound, and then a message gets sent from my head to where my vocal cords are found, and they vibrate and cause the air to vibrate too. Then the air gets shot out of my mouth on its way to you. This vibration I've just made travels as a wave, but if I vibrated differently, then it would cause the wave to change. If I sing low, then the frequency of the wave drops. If I sing high, then the frequency is high too. And if I'm loud, then my microphone pops. The sound wave travels through the air unless it hits a wall. Then the higher frequencies get absorbed and the deeper ones pass through.
And that's why when I'm behind a window I sound like this.
And if the wall is hard, then the sound bounces back and you can hear an echo. The sound is captured by my microphone and stored digitally. That was until you played this video, and now your speakers are mimicking me. And now the waves are back and going into your ear. Only 6 more steps inside your head until you get to hear. Sound is touch at a distance. When they say that music can touch you, it literally does. Sound is a vibration that, thanks to modern science, we can know it's shaking our eardrums. And the drum then shakes some tiny bones, and the bones send vibration to a liquid, and the waves in the liquid bend some hairs, and the hairs send a signal to the brain, and it's only when it forms a pattern in your head that you can hear. I never really figured out a good way to end that song. Fun Science.
Okay, so a lot of information in there. We're going to watch it now again one more time, and we'll kind of pause it at certain places, and we'll talk about the things that he's talking about. Some are review, some we haven't really touched on yet. So, let's check it out.
Science is a science of fun, yeah. Ready? It starts with an idea or an impulse to make a sound, and then a message gets sent from my head to where my vocal cords are found, and they vibrate and cause the air to vibrate too. Then the air gets shot out of my mouth on its way to you.
So, we've talked about that before. Your brain sends a signal, which flexes the muscles in here, which vibrate your vocal cords, which then they vibrate. That shakes the air in your throat, which then shakes the air in your mouth, which then shakes the air out here, which then shakes the ear in the eardrums, or the ears, rather, of people you're in the same room with. And then that air shakes the eardrums, which then he talks a little bit later about how you actually get to hear. But yeah, right now, I'm not, it's kind of interesting. There's an analogy I use in this video, but we'll talk about it in a minute. It's a little bit different here doing it digitally, but it still works, which is kind of cool. So yeah, that's kind of review.
This vibration I've just made travels as a wave, but if I vibrated differently, then it would cause the wave to change. If I sing low, then the frequency of the wave drops. If I sing high, then the frequency is high too. And if I'm loud, then my microphone pops.
So, the frequency of sounds that we hear, or what's known as the pitch, is really just the frequency of the sound waves. And we talked a little bit about this in the last unit when we talked about how microphones and speakers work. But yeah, so higher pitch sounds, high, you can also hear the versus the low. It's just the frequency. Lower note sounds, they don't vibrate as much. The wave energy, though, still travels at the same speed in that medium. So kind of conversely there, as you saw, lower note waves have a longer wavelength, and higher frequency sounds, higher pitch sounds, have a shorter wavelength, because those both travel at the same speed. You don't hear high pitch sounds before you hear lower pitch sounds. They're all going at the same speed there. And then the pop, which you might have just heard. Sorry if that was not cool. You're all wearing headphones. I just realized that. I might try to edit that out. I'm sorry. I'll probably forget to edit that out. I'll probably roast myself pretty hard on the Ed Puzzle about that. But that popping, that's, they're talking about the amplitude of the sound, right? So loud means that there's just more energy there. And that means that the microphone can't keep up with that. And it just kind of comes up as static, which is why really loud sounds are just getting distorted. So, yeah.
The sound wave travels through the air unless it hits a wall. Then the higher frequencies get absorbed and the deeper ones pass through.
And that's why when I'm behind a window, I sound like this.
So that's a cool point there. So we talked about today that sound travels fastest through a solid. Well, then why didn't you hear it more clearly, right? Well, that's because of the way we perceive sound. Now, a lot of what we hear in the enunciation of sounds, those of you who have practiced public speaking, or those of you theater folks, we talk about diction and your enunciation. All of those sounds that really tell you what sound the letter makes, which I'm really accentuating right now, are very high frequency pitch sounds. So on my, this is going to be really cool. On my thing here, I can control my low notes and my high notes. So check out how different the sound is when I pull the high frequency out. Like, all I did was I pulled the slider down, and it's a lot harder to understand what I'm saying now. But when I put that right back in, now you can really hear very clearly what I'm saying, what I'm talking about. The sound, the same kind of happens if I boost the bass. You can kind of hear that extra kind of whoa, 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 which it's not awesome for speech, so we kind of usually keep that leveled out. But if we take it all the way out, then it's, I don't know, it kind of sounds a little tinny, a little more, I don't know, not as natural as I think. So you always want to add a little bit of bass to your sound. So some sound editing skills and tricks here. But yes, the sound will travel faster through a solid or through a liquid, but those molecules are more dense and they're harder to oscillate. So energy kind of dissipates easier. So those very quick vibrations, that energy gets absorbed and dies out really quick. Right? That's why sound doesn't travel infinitely forever. That's why even though I'm talking right now, like in my basement on a Saturday, you can't hear me. Because the energy that I'm doing, it goes out uniformly, right? It goes out in every direction. So every distance, that energy is getting spread out amongst more and more molecules. And eventually, that energy gets spread out so thin that there's not enough energy to shake molecules anymore. And so in a solid, those higher frequency ones, those ones die out really quickly because there's just so many more molecules there for them to shed their energy to. Whereas the lower ones, they can kind of pass through because they're not oscillating as much. And so you end up hearing that distorted sound where you can kind of hear the bulk of the sound, but you can't really understand it as well. You can't really, especially when I go like this, it's really hard to understand what I'm saying because all those higher frequency sounds that dictate the diction there and the enunciation are being cut out. So it's the same thing as me just pulling down the high frequency there, and now you can't understand me as well. I mean, you still kind of can because, I'm doing a pretty good job of enunciating. I've been practicing public speaking for a while now. But, you can't hear me as clearly as if I put that sound back in there like that. Which, this is such a cool thing to do. I got to do this in the future. Like, I will just pull out a remote learning victory. Okay, cool. So let's check the rest of this video out.
Absorbed and the deeper ones pass through.
And that's why when I'm behind a window, I sound like this.
And if the wall is hard, then the sound bounces back and you can hear an echo.
So, when sound waves do transfer through different media, two things happen. Some of that energy gets reflected back. Some of it passes through. And depending on how it's passing through, it can get refracted. We're going to talk a whole lot about that in the next video. So when waves change media, you get a reflection and a refraction. And the reflection of a sound wave is really just the echo that you hear. And that's what he's talking about there.
The sound is captured by my microphone and stored digitally. That was until you played this video, and now your speakers are mimicking me, and now the waves are back and going into your ear.
So we talked about that last week, how sound waves are, picked up by, generators, right? The microphone is just a generator. Generator, right? Yeah, because you're taking the motion and turning it into electricity, and those electricity goes back and forth are saved digitally as ones and zeros, and then just, recreated through your speakers. You send that electricity as ones and zeros, it pulls and pushes, and then you get the sound through your speakers, or your headphones right now, if you're listening. Butts! Media unavailable. Nuh-uh. Cool. No, come on. We're not going to watch this whole thing again. Hold on. We'll come back. Okay. What else do we need to know about sound? Play.
Bones and the bones send vibration to a liquid, and the waves in the liquid bend some hairs, and the hairs send a signal to the brain, and it's only when it forms a pattern in your head that you can hear.
Oh, we missed the most important part.
That thanks to modern science, we can know it's shaking our eardrums at a distance. This video, and now your speakers are mimicking me, and now the waves are back and going into your ear. Only 6 more steps inside your head until you get to hear.
Okay, this next one is like the most artsy, profound, like, notion. And it's really why I love this song. Yeah, it's cool that he's got some good videos there, some descriptions, explaining some stuff. But this is like the thing I was just like, whoa, this is why I gotta show it to my students.
Sound is touch at a distance. When they say that music can touch you, it literally does.
So, sound is touch at a distance. Like, you're literally touching people when you make sounds, when you talk to them. Like, you're like, you know, it's the same thing as grabbing a stick or a pen and poking them. You're grabbing an air stick with your vocal cords, and you are poking them in the ear with it. You are literally touching people when you talk to them. Yeah, science, based on our definition, right? Like to poke someone with an object means to grab the object and poke them with it, like touch them physically with it. That's what you're doing when you're talking. Your vocal cords are grabbing the air molecules and then pushing them into, like, through the chain motion there, through the domino effect, right into somebody else's ear. So music literally touches you, right? You can be like, oh, that song really touched me. Yeah, all songs touch you, right in the eardrum. They all touch you. It's crazy. It's very artsy and profound. I love it.
Sound is a vibration that, thanks to modern science, we can know it's shaking our eardrums. And the drum then shakes some tiny bones, and the bones send vibration to a liquid, and the waves in the liquid bend some hairs, and the hairs send a signal to the brain, and it's only when it forms a pattern in your head that you can hear.
So, I think in one class, someone had asked about this, and I posted it. I might not have posted it on the other board, but I will try and find that video again, which talks a little bit more about how that sound, gets into our ears and stuff. So very in-depth of that one. I'll post that to the board there.
I never really figured out a good way to end that song.
That's okay, Charlie.
Fun Science Extra, Mr. Information. Hi kids, I'm Mr. Information, and today I'm going to be giving you
cheesy.
the gift of knowledge. Now, my good friend Charlie just taught you all about sound and hearing just so happens to be one of the 5 senses, which is what I'm going to be teaching you about today. The 5 senses that humans have are hearing, taste, smell, sight,
Yep, there's no glass in those glasses.
and touch. And those are all of the senses that we have. Some of the things that you thought you knew about senses might be partially incorrect. Depending on what your definition of a sense is, humans have at least 9 senses. Right? 9, not 5. 9.
9.
How'd you like that, Mr. Information?
Meh.
The secret senses are sense of pain, sense of temperature, sense of balance, and proprioception, which is knowing where your body parts are in space without having to look at them. And now you know the truth.
Whoa! That's a funny face. Yeah, like what defines a sense? Check out Google some more about that on your own. It's pretty cool stuff. So that was Charlie. Oh, there he is again. All right, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, so he's got another great one. He doesn't have a huge fun science thing. I don't know. I found that in my 3rd year of teaching, and I've just kind of kept it. I got to go back and see if Charlie's got any new stuff. He's mainly just a video vlogger. He usually talks about his life and stuff. But he had a couple of those fun science ones that were like amazing. So that's it about sound. I'm dreading to see how long this Edpuzzle ended up taking. It was not supposed to be very long, but I think it's really long now. I'm sorry. I apologize. But at this point, what questions and connections do you have? Probably a lot. Sound's usually a very big topic, and people usually have a lot of questions about them. So post them to the board. Let's have a chat. Let's talk about it. You know, let's jam. Let's rap. Let's have a rap sesh. All right, sorry. I'll let you go. See you in the next video.